Once the soundtrack of freedom and rebellion, American car culture is now running on fumes. But how did we go from V8s and burnouts to software updates and silent EVs? There was a time when a car meant something, when Mustangs roared and garages were temples. And now, we rent Teslas by the hour and let apps decide our routes, all in the name of efficiency. The soul of driving didn't vanish overnight, it was chipped away, block by block, and today, we're breaking down 5 key moments that slowly drove American car passion into the guardrail. So buckle up, if you even remember how, and let's figure out if the spirit of the open road still has a pulse. Key event number 1 was the oil crisis of the 1970s. Now, in the early 1970s, American car culture was at its peak. The streets were filled with roaring V8s, and horsepower wasn't just measured, it was worshipped. The muscle car was more than a machine, it was a statement. It said you were free, untamed, maybe even a little reckless, and damn proud of it. But then everything changed. In 1973, the OPEC oil embargo sent fuel prices soaring. Just a few years later, the Iranian Revolution triggered another shock. Suddenly, gas, once cheap and abundant, became a scarce, expensive commodity. Americans who had built a lifestyle around long roads and big engines were blindsided. The impact on car culture was immediate and painful. Those beloved muscle cars, once the beating heart of American garages and driveways, became burdens. Fuel-hungry and expensive to run, they were no longer practical. The freedom they represented came at a cost that many could no longer afford. People began turning to smaller, more efficient cars, mainly from Japan. Cars that didn't rumble or roar. They didn't ignite the senses, but they worked. They were economical, sensible. The shift wasn't just about money, it was about identity. The American driver began to let go of horsepower and embrace efficiency. Then in 1975 came the CAFE standards, regulations that forced automakers to prioritize fuel economy over power. Engines shrank, performance waned, and just like that, the golden age of American muscle faded into memory. What had once been loud and proud went quiet. The garages that once echoed with the sound of wrenches and revving engines began to fall silent. The oil crises didn't just change what we drove, they changed why we drove, and for many it marked the first real fracture in a relationship with cars that once felt unbreakable. The second key event was stricter emissions and safety regulations. Now, the oil crises may have started the slowdown, but it was the regulations that really pulled the handbrake on American car passion. In the mid-1970s, the US government began enforcing a series of new emissions and safety standards. On paper, it made sense as it meant cleaner air and safer roads. But in practice, it came at a cost that car lovers felt deep in their chests. The EPA rolled out mandates for catalytic converters in 1975. The once unfiltered growl of an American V8 had to pass through a filter. Literally. Performance took a hit, engines were detuned, power dropped, and what once felt like raw mechanical freedom began to feel restrained. At the same time, the NHTSA stepped in with safety regulations. Seatbelt mandates became law in 1984, crash test standards followed, cars got heavier, bulkier, and less nimble, steel was added, sharp edges were smoothed, and little by little, the wildness was engineered out. The result was a generation of cars that felt like they were built more to survive than to excite. Acceleration lagged, handling dulled, and the very essence of what once made American cars thrilling, the unpredictability, the aggression, the danger, was muted in the name of progress. It's not that safety and clean air weren't important. They are. But for a culture that had built itself on rebellion, risk, and the roar of unfiltered combustion, it felt like a part of the soul was being legislated out of existence. You couldn't wrench the same way, you couldn't modify without worrying about emissions. The joy of building and pushing limits was replaced by checklists, compliance, and compromise. In the name of safety, the soul of the American muscle car was slowly silenced. And once that sound was gone, something deeper started to fade too. The connection, the romance, the idea that a car could be a form of personal expression, not just a machine to keep you alive. The third event is the rise of imports. By the 1980s, the rumble of American muscle had quieted. The oil crises and regulations had softened the edge, and into that silence came something new, sleek, efficient, and foreign. Japanese automakers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan began flooding the market with cars that didn't try to be loud or dramatic, they just worked. They were affordable, reliable, and easy on gas. Where American cars had become bloated and inconsistent, these imports felt like a breath of fresh air, especially to younger drivers who didn't grow up idolizing GTOs or Chargers. And with them came a whole new kind of car culture. Tuner culture, lightweight, high-revving, mod-friendly imports. Instead of chrome and cubic inches, it was boost pressure and bolt-ons. Civics replaced Chevelles in high school parking lots. Supras became the new dream machines. Even street racing, once dominated by Detroit Iron, shifted toward these agile, tech-driven underdogs. The movement wasn't just mechanical, it was cultural. This was a generation raced on video games, anime, and internet forums, not drag strips and Haynes manuals. Car culture didn't die, it just switched flags. And while there was still passion, still performance, something about the feel of it had changed. The soundtracks were different, the swagger was different, the pride of being American-built gave way to pride in being well-built no matter where it came from. For the old guard, the ones who remembered the smell of leaded gas and the feel of raw torque, it felt like betrayal, but for the kids stepping into this new scene, it was just evolution. A different kind of love for a different kind of car, and so the torch was passed. Not with fanfare, but with quiet resignation. The muscle car was no longer the heartbeat of youth. It had become a relic that was admired, but no longer central to the story. The fourth key event is the urbanization and death of the drive. Now, just as the tuner scene took hold and redefined what car culture looked like, something else started to change. Not just what we drove, but why. Because in the growing sprawl of the modern world, the joy of driving started to lose its place. There was a time when getting your driver's license was a rite of passage, a sacred milestone of freedom. That little plastic card didn't just let you drive, it meant escape, independence, and the ability to disappear down some long winding road with the windows down and your future wide open. But over the last 2 decades, that urgency faded. As cities grew and suburbs stretched out, the drive became less about joy and more about logistics. Long commutes, gridlocked highways, expensive parking, the open road became the daily grind. At the same time, technology gave us options. Rideshare showed up with the promise of convenience over commitment. Why own a car when you can summon one with a tap? Public transport got better, city life got tighter, and cars, the ones we used to dream about, became just another appliance, like a microwave on wheels. Kids stopped rushing to get their license. For many, driving became a hassle instead of a thrill. The weekend joyride was replaced by food delivery apps and scrolling through Instagram. Car meets turned into group chats. Tuning sessions became video edits, and slowly a culture that once thrived in parking lots and garages moved online and out of sight. Owning a car used to be freedom, now it's just a payment plan. And for a generation raised in crowded cities and digital spaces, the road doesn't call the same way it used to. The fifth key event is electrification and the algorithm. And just when driving started feeling more like a chore than a thrill, the car themselves began to change, not just how they moved, but how we connected to them. The 2010s brought a new revolution. Tesla showed the world that electric cars didn't have to be slow or boring. They could be fast, futuristic, and borderline silent. Other automakers followed, and soon the EV wasn't an experiment anymore, it was the future, but something got lost in translation. Yes, electric cars are quick. They have instant torque, zero emissions, and no maintenance headaches. But there's no growl, no vibration, no scent of gas in the air. There's no clutch to master, no gears to grind. The sensory experience, the messy, greasy, imperfect beauty of old-school driving disappeared beneath the hum of efficiency. At the same time, social media rewired the way we experience cars altogether. What used to be about clubs, meets, late-night drives, and weekends under the hood became about content. Algorithms replaced garages, influence replaced community, and now it's about who can post the flashiest clip, the loudest rap, and the wildest burnout for likes. Car culture isn't dead, it just moved online, and in that move it changed. We no longer gather to swap stories and trade parts, we follow, like, comment, and scroll. The builds still happen, but often behind ring lights and for audiences instead of friends. It's performance, but a different kind. And just like that, the thing that once brought us together now gets filtered, edited, and fed to a feed. So here we are. From gas shortages to green mandates, from crash tests to content trends, American car culture has been under attack from every angle, and it does show. What once roared now hums. What once united rebels, tinkerers, and thrill seekers now feels scattered, digitized, and a little quiet. But if you listen closely, there's still a heartbeat. You'll find it in the glow of a garage light at 2 a.m. where someone's rebuilding their dad's old Charger from the ground up. You'll feel it at the drag strip where the smell of burnt rubber still says more than any algorithm ever could. Car culture hasn't died, not completely. It's just waiting to be revived, waiting for a new generation to remember that cars aren't just about transportation. They're about identity, expression, connection, freedom. The question now is, who's going to bring it back?